Good morning. This is John from the Springs Mennonite Church. Thanks for being with me today. I have another story to share, this time from the 9th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, as I talk about some of the events in the early adult life of Jesus. And this morning, I want to share from Matthew chapter 9, and actually beginning with verse 9. Here's what it says. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at his tax collector's booth. "Follow me and be my disciple," Jesus said to him. So Matthew got up and followed him. Later, Matthew invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with many other tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. But when the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with such scum?" Well, this is an interesting story. But then again, I think they're all interesting stories, and I, I kind of hope you do too. But here we see Jesus once again walking along. I don't know if he was deliberately out looking for people to be his disciples. I suppose he knows what he's doing, so of course he was, but it seems kind of random to me. And it seems as though he just loved people. That's a novel thought. And so he comes across this tax collector. Now, in Jesus' day, tax collectors were really the scum of the earth. They were hated because they took money away from the Jews to give it to those dastardly Roman government folks. And they always were, let's say, a little bit sleazy because the tax collector got to keep whatever he got above the needed taxes. And so many tax collectors were really scorned by the religious folks in Jesus' day. So it says here that Jesus is walking along and he sees Matthew. And Matthew is one of these hated tax collectors. And he says something to him really simple. "Follow me and be my disciple." Now, I don't know, because the scripture doesn't tell us, if Matthew had heard about Jesus before or not. But it's an interesting pattern here because it's the same pattern I talked about where Jesus called Peter and Andrew. He just saw them and called them, and they dropped what they were doing at an instant to go and follow Jesus. And it appears here that Matthew did the same thing because it says, so Matthew got up and followed him. Now, this was a really, really big step for Matthew. He was losing his status in society, his prestige among the Romans, and all of his livelihood. You know, at least Peter and Simon could go fishing at any time and make a little something. Matthew gives it all up. And he gives it all up because, as far as we know, because Jesus invited him to come along. Well, that would be a great story if it stopped at that point, but it doesn't because then Matthew invites Jesus to come eat at his house. Now, as a pastor, I can tell you I've been invited to eat at a lot of places. Sometimes I was the very first pastor ever invited into that house, and I thought that was quite an honor. And I've been into places that some folks might think weren't all that respectable. But that's okay. I didn't really care what they thought. And evidently, Jesus didn't either, because he goes. And he not only has dinner with Matthew, but he has it with other tax collectors, and as the scriptures say, other sinners. And then, as the story goes, the religious leaders go to his disciples and say, hey, what's wrong with this guy? You know your teacher is associating with the wrong crowd. And they say, as it put in the New Living Translation, why does he eat with such scum? Now, here's the story for you and for me, and it's how we look at people. I know I'm human, I do it too. I look at some folks and I don't see the precious gift of God that they are in God's eyes. Now, I keep trying to do better at it, and I hope you do too. But the fact of the matter is, God looks at each person. He looks at you and me. And whether we think we're really high up on the totem pole in terms of great Christians, or whether we see ourselves even below the totem pole down in the really deep pits of the dirt because we're worthless. However we see ourselves is not how God sees us. Jesus saw this guy, Matthew. There was something about him that Jesus saw that no other religious leader ever saw. Now, as it turns out, he writes one of the most magnificent of the Gospels. So you need a guy who pays attention to detail every once in a while. And believe me, a tax collector paid attention to detail. But there was something more about Matthew. Jesus knows people's hearts. He knows your heart. He knows mine. He knows what we are really capable of, even if we don't think so. I've had so many people tell me they couldn't do something to help out when really they could. They just didn't believe they could. And you know, God believes in you and me, even when we're messing up, even if we have always messed up and never didn't mess up. He still believes in you and me. The story goes on, and I just touch base with it a little bit, where Jesus answers his disciples and he said, don't you know it's the sick that need the doctor? Don't you know it's the sinners who recognize that are going to respond? Too many people think they're better than others. Now, I hope I'm not talking to you. At the same time, too many people think they are worse than others. And the fact of the matter is, God sees you and me and all those around us in exactly the same way, as a person of worth and potential for his kingdom. So I hope today that's how you see yourself. I know I make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. But the mistakes don't define us. It's our reaction to God's love that defines us. Will you think about that? I'll be back one more time this week talking on this topic of events in Jesus' early life. Thank you so much for listening. If you have a prayer concern or a need, let us know. We'll do everything we can as fast as we can to help meet that need. So until tomorrow, have a great day. I'll talk to you again.